It's an absolute pleasure to have Matthew Mack the Knife Macklin on a ringside seat with Tassie. Welcome, mate.
How you doing?
Good, thanks, buddy. How you been?
Yeah, not too bad. You look in better spirits than the last time I seen you.
That was awful, mate. At the airport, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, gee, you and Johnny Nelson, mate. Mate, that was yeah, stuck in Saudi for longer than I was meant to. Then missed, yeah. Then
Yeah.
they cancelled a flight to Doha. Then I had a 19-hour wait in Doha.
Yeah, we were just trying to hoping. Well, we were hoping you'd calm down because we were thinking
Yeah,
we could see how you could probably get, you know what I mean,
you get
re
locked up. Yeah,
reprimanded over there. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Because but you were pretty inconsolable.
One of the definitely a place not to get in trouble, I reckon, over there too.
But there wasn't much
Yeah,
talking to you. Your head was gone.
the good old Aussie temper, mate. But yeah, look, it was. I was with one of the IBF supervisors as well, and he was just like, they no one was helping us, no one was guiding us to what was going on. They didn't give us a hotel for the yeah. But anyway, I got home eventually, mate, and all was well. I got home without being arrested.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
So, mate, I want to, really, appreciate your time, mate. 'Cause I know you're a busy man, and you're obviously working too. Are you working with Sky now, or who are you working with in the media?
Yeah, Sky Sports. I've been with them since, well, even before I retired, really. I was doing bits for them sort of at the end of my own career.
Yeah,
They would get me on quite a lot. So it was just a natural progression.
yeah. And you've been obviously been at most of the Saudi fights. I've seen you there pretty much for all of them. How are you enjoying that now?
Yeah, I mean it's no Las Vegas, but it's they've put on some. It's getting there. I think every time it's a bit better.
Hmm.
Um, it'll take a while, won't it? But the I think for fans to buy into going over there to the events, I think that's when it'll really take off. I think the Fury Usyk fight, the first one, there was quite a lot of fans there.
Huge.
There was a lot of fans there. It was and it was better. You
Yeah,
need the fans, no matter what it is. We've seen it in the lockdown when there were sport went back behind closed doors, and it was we all love sport. We particularly love boxing, but even other sports. But like without the crowd, without the fans' participation, it's nowhere near as enjoyable. It is a major part of the enjoyment of sport is the fans' participation, the atmosphere. So Saudi they're getting there. They're making great fights. They're putting on fights that probably wouldn't have happened without them. So big credit for that. Bivol, Beterbiev, two fantastic fights with such
yeah.
quick turnaround to get the rematch. Same with the Usyk Fury. I don't know would that have happened pre-Saudi. I don't know if those fights. First of all, would they have happened at all? But secondly, I don't think we'd have seen the quick rematch turnarounds had it not been for that. So, as a boxing fan, we're grateful for that. And like I say, there's no expense spared. The events are well ran. You know yourself, you've been there. Just don't miss your the connection flight.
That's it. That's all right. No, 100%, mate. But you're right. I mean, like the first Fury Usyk, all the English fans, they were the ones that made the atmosphere. That was electric. Then Bivol Beterbiev won, two Russians fighting each other. It was quiet. It was a lot more. It was just didn't have the feeling at all without the UK fans. Fury Usyk 2 was good. Probably not as good as the first one with the crowd wise. And then Beterbiev Bivol 2, smaller stadium, wasn't it? It was a bit
And,
smaller.
and I think that was the right decision, and I
I
think
think it
that's the
was
way to go
too.
forward. I thought, it was still sizable. It's not. I mean, what did it hold? 6, 7,000. I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah,
Eight maybe. Um, and I think for an event in Saudi Arabia right now, until I mean, they're putting on these huge fight cards that, let's be honest, if they were in Las Vegas, they'd sell out the T-Mobile. They'd probably have to go outdoors. They're
mm,
putting on stacked cards. They really are. You know what I mean? But it's humans. We're habitual. We get, we pattern. We live in patterns, don't we? We've got habits and, spending habits. View how we consume information, how we view sports and travel. And at the minute, it's going to take a shift, but and it's happening, I think. And then they're obviously spending a lot of money in Saudi Arabia to bring sports there. Not just boxing, across the board. They're trying to. They want to open up to the world and want people to go there to view sports and to see sports as a way to go. And Fury Usyk one did have, like you say, there was a lot of fans there. Like I say, I agree with you. Second time round, not as much, but it was a funny time, wasn't it? Just before Christmas,
Yeah.
etc. But I do think in terms of how, and they're learning as well. But there's that other arena, the big one, the Kingdom Arena. It's almost too big. The smaller arena is the perfect size, I feel. You can hold the atmosphere better. You're not under as much pressure logistically, even working at it. I mean, you're sitting ringside and you're commentating on the fight, and you need to go to the toilet in that big place. It's a nightmare. You know what I mean?
It
You've
was
both got to
hard. Yeah.
plan ahead. But that the other place, it was a lot more manageable, and it was better. I think it was better working there. It was better for the fans watching the fights, the closest to the ring, and I would imagine it was a lot better for the viewer watching on television at home.
Totally agree, mate. Well, let's get into your great career, mate. When did you start off, mate? When did you have your first amateur fight, and where did you start your career?
I was 10 years old when I went down to the gym, but you have to be 11 in the UK. We did then anyway to box to get your medical card.
Mhm.
So I was 11. I was 11 years old when I had my first fight. It was St. Patrick's Day, 1994.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, that's when it all started for me. Obviously, I've been in the gym a few months before that. Small Heath Boxing Club in Birmingham. Boxed for them my whole amateur career. Turned pro at 19. And then yeah, boxed pro for 15 years.
yeah. Did you represent the UK internationally?
Yeah, boxed for England at schoolboy level, junior, young England they
Yep.
called it, the
Yep.
19s, and then also I boxed in the World Junior Championships in Budapest in 2000, and then I won the senior ABAs at 18, uh, and then after that, boxed in the Acropolis Cup in Athens and
Yep.
turned pro, literally in the
Yep.
September or October of that year. Then,
Was you signed to any sort of one of the major promoters? Was it Frank
yeah,
or Eddie?
Frank Warren Eddie wasn't around then. Barry was his dad, but he was very much number two at that time to Frank Warren, who was the man. He had Ricky Hatton, he had Joe Calzaghe, he had Scott Harrison. Um,
Would have had
it,
Naz probably around
he
that. Oh,
just
he'll be
he'd had Naz before that.
just had
He'd
Naz
had
before.
Ben
Everyone.
you
Yeah.
well Barry Hearn had a Eubank, didn't he? But
Yeah.
like you know what I mean. Frank was the number one guy back
Yeah.
then, definitely.
Yeah. Beautiful, mate. And obviously, yeah, you had a few. Did you have a few like in concession, like the first year? Like, it's always good to get a few 4 to 6 bouts in a row. Did you have sort of quite active from your debut onwards? Was you quite active?
I had 7 in the first 10 months.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, I was busy and it was great, and I recommend it to any prospect turning professional. Funnily enough, I was just I was on Boxer the other day because I just wanted to check a fact of when the Bruno Tyson fight happened because I just watched the documentary on Sky. It was pretty
Yeah,
good
it's a good
actually.
one, isn't it? Yeah, it's a
It
good
was
doco.
good, because that's one of my first memories. The Eubank Tyson fight. I remember everyone talking about it, but I also remember I remember the Larry Holmes fight with Tyson because my dad telling me about it, and I was trying to see
Yep.
which one was first and all this because I wanted my timeline right because I was going to reference it I was going on Sky Sports to announce that we were doing the
Yep.
Ben Eubank fight, and I remember the Ben Eubank fight being 1990, so I was just thinking about the dates. But anyway, the Tyson Bruno fight. It was a huge fight at the time, and I've lost my train of thought now.
You were looking
Where have we
up
got?
just to fact with it with the with Tyson and Bruno. Was it before or after Larry Holmes or? I think it was after Larry Holmes' fight, wasn't it, that he fought
Oh, we're
Bruno?
fighting about being busy. So I was looking at Mike
Oh,
Tyson's
about being
record.
active. Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
He turned pro. He had
Oh,
15 fights in his first year, I think it was, and 13 fights in the second year,
yeah.
or up until I think the Trevor Berbick fight was his 14th fight of that
Yeah.
calendar year,
Yeah.
and
Customoto kept him very
he'd
busy.
had 15 fights the
Mm,
calendar year before. And I'm just
crazy.
thinking, like, now guys are like turning pro and want to box like 4 times in a year.
Yeah.
A lot prone about prospects turning pro,
I know.
you
I
know,
know.
but it's like, and it's mental, really. You know what I mean? Like you like in no other sport would that happen. You know, you see it, but and I know how it has got there because in a funny kind of way, more money coming into the sport in lots of ways has hurt it
Yeah,
because
I agree.
because what's happened is um to generate the money to justify paying the money because fighters are earning, let's say at the top anyway, are earning big money. To generate that, to justify paying that money, they have to generate that money. So to generate that money, it has to be an event. You know, it has to be a big arena. It has to be a pay-per-view. It has to sell out, all these things. Then you've got all the logistics of putting a big event together takes a lot of time. First of all, just the negotiations to get things done,
Yeah.
to get a venue that's available that matches the television date, etc., etc. So you're negotiating for weeks, then you're putting it together. So you can only do that so many times in a year. So then fighters are fighting less. Now, it was okay, the likes of Mayweather and Pacquiao
Yeah.
boxing twice a year way back because they were up there then. Do you know what I mean? But like if you're a prospect coming through, very much developing, trying to develop your abilities, developing your tactics, your technique, your skills, etc., and also developing your brand, your profile. It, it's not. It really hurts you to box so inactive. When Mike Tyson, I don't think there's anyone that ever been built as well that to have
Oh,
such
yeah.
momentum, such hype, such every. It's no coincidence that he boxed 27, 20, 29 times in two
Mm,
years.
yeah.
He's on the television. I was like,
Mm,
so the fact the sports fans just constantly seeing him. That's
mm,
talk about promotion.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Unbelievable.
nowadays, it's like, I just signed a deal for a kid that I'm managing, and he's guaranteed, 5 fights in his first year. You
Mm.
know, I'm not going back to the 1940s. I'm not going back to the black and white television days. I'm going
Yeah.
back to the 90s. Oscar De La Hoya boxed 5 times
Oh,
as world champion
yeah.
in 1997.
Yes.
You know
Yep.
what I mean?
Here's
Yet
my
I'm
favorite.
doing a deal for a young kid turning pro, and the promoter is guaranteeing him 5 fights in his first year.
Yeah.
Now, in my time, 20 I did just 20 years ago, just over, I had 7 fights in 10 months.
Mm.
After that, I wasn't as active because of the injuries and different things, and you change trainers and you change promoters and whatever. But momentum, consistency, being busy, active, these things were a major reason why fighters became stars.
Yep.
It's a lot more difficult nowadays to build a star, even though there's so many more um,
Platforms and
platforms and
yeah.
outlets.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's because boxers aren't boxing enough, and that's why sponsors. It's a big reason why sponsors, main brands, don't want to sponsor boxers because you're not getting much bang for your buck. You
Yep.
know, you know what I mean? If you're boxing a guy, if you're sponsoring Joshua or Canelo, okay, they're huge stars, but they're boxing twice a year.
Yeah.
You can, you sponsor a football team or a basketball or whatever. They're playing every week, twice a
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Totally agree, mate. I tell all the fighters I train, I tell everyone that will listen, inactivity kills fighters' careers. There's nothing like being active. Now, you're talking about back then with De La Hoya, but Julio Cesar Chavez and James Toney, as champions, fought, 8, 10 times a year. I remember, and back then you could have a non-title fight and it'd be okay. Chavez would have non-title fights or James Toney. But imagine having a non-title fight now, you'd be ridiculed. They'd kill you in the media if, say, you know, Canelo wanted a non-title fight or someone wanted a non-title fight. You know, it's just it's definitely a lot different, like you said, and the way Customato and Jim Jacobs built Tyson by being active, being seen regularly. Yeah, look, totally agree, mate. They don't fight nowhere near as much as they used to.
But also, aside from the promotional side of it, and as a fighter,
Mm.
people are overtrained these days and underfought. They're not fighting often enough, and they're training for far too long. Do you know what I mean? It's like people, you see prospects going, oh, they need 8 weeks and 10 weeks. Like, what? Why? What are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, if you're unless you're if you're doing any kind of training, staying active at all, like you can do a lot in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Like if you spar, let's say you spar Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 sparring sessions. Like as long as you're healthy and active, you know what I
Mm.
mean. I've got any kind of a level of a base fitness. You can literally go boom. You know what I mean. You can literally make a lot of ground in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're fit enough to get in there and spar 4 rounds, that's it. And you spar four, five, six, seven, eight. You're up to eight in sparring. You've gone from
Mm.
4 rounds sparring. Maybe that was a bit tough because your first spar and you're a bit stiff and sore the next day. But by the end of 2 weeks, 6 sparring sessions, let's say the other days you do pad sessions, you get a couple of runs in. You you can really go from here to here in a couple of weeks. Like 6 weeks is a long time.
Of
Do you
course.
know what I mean? Like, I spot and I say this to someone that generally would have been training for 10 weeks. But I'll be honest with you, the first 4 or 5 weeks of that was a detox from alcohol,
You are Irish.
building a base fitness that should have been there,
Yeah.
and losing weight.
Yeah.
Because what had happened was, because I'd been in training for 10 and 12 weeks, I was so, forget the physical, I was so mentally and emotionally burnt out
Mm.
that I needed a blowout.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the blowout means I get so out of shape that now I need 10 and 12 weeks.
Mm.
Because the reality was that the first half of that 10 or 12 weeks shouldn't have been required if I'd been ticking over. But when you're only boxing twice a year and you haven't got a date, you lose focus.
Of course.
And you're a single bloke, you're in your mid-20s, you know what I mean? You go out, you know what I mean? And you overindulge.
Yeah.
And what happens is but if you were boxing like the guys like Chavez and James Toney, 6, 7, 8 times a year, 10 times a year, say 6 times a year even, you can stay focused.
Of
You can keep
course.
a goal. You need routine, you need structure.
Mm.
The man that goes out working has got structure in his life. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's got routine and he's got structure. Even he's going on a building site. He's up in the morning. He works at this time. He comes home. He works Monday to Friday. He has a little bit of downtime on the weekend, and he's back in. He's got routine. He's got structure. He's got purpose. As a boxer, speaking for myself, but it was definitely a cultural thing within the boxing game around the time. I trained with Ricky Hatton, so it was big, work hard, play hard, and it was like you played as hard as you worked, and we did work hard, but we did burn the candle at both ends, and
Yeah.
in between fights. But I think a big part of that was not having a goal,
Mm.
not having a focus, not having a fight. You know what I mean? Like when you're boxing twice a year, there's too much downtime.
Totally agree. You need a date. Us boxers, we haven't got a date in our head. Like you said, the structure's not there. It's just whatever will happen. We can go and eat, we can go and drink, we can go and party. We need a date to keep us motivated. And like unless you're coming up like with fights regularly, but I mean, yeah, in your terms, when you got to that point where you're sort of on the world stage, you're not fighting enough, like you said, and that date's not there often enough, is it? So that's what you do, sort of take you off the prize and get in a bit of trouble, like yeah.
Hey, well, let's be honest. Most boxers aren't choir boys.
Oh,
you gotta be a bit mad to want to
We're all
box in the
lads.
first
Oh, there's
place.
something wrong with
You
us,
know,
mate.
do
100%. We're
you know
not.
what I mean? So, then you know, you got if there's too much time on your hand and you got no focus, you got no purpose, you got no routine, you got no structure. And if you're a single bloke, I mean, if you're
Yeah,
in a relationship, that might be different. She might
bit
have
of
structure, and
structure
that might
there.
be.
Yeah.
But if you're a single bloke, you're left to your own. Like, what are you going to do?
Mm,
You know what I mean? And it's like and if you're someone that trains away from home, which I did,
yeah.
which so then you're dealing with a lot of loneliness. You know what I mean? You're hungry, lonely, tired all the time, and then you have a fight. Like the reality, and then you come home, and now you're at home where you live, so you haven't got the gym to go to. All right, there are gyms you can go to, but you haven't got your gym. Let's say there's your gym buddies. So it's like you think I'll start tomorrow. I'll get back in the gym next week. But
Yeah.
next week and tomorrow never comes until, do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
once you get out of shape, getting back in shape's
It's a
hard
nightmare.
work,
Oh, it's
painful.
hard.
And so
Hard.
it's easy. So if you don't have to, for me anyway, I'd put it off.
Mm,
Every time, every Monday, every Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. Oh, Monday I'm back in the gym. But then, I'd go out Sunday. Tuesday. Then Tuesday happened. You can't start anything on a Tuesday. Next
yeah.
Monday.
Next
You know?
Monday.
And
Oh,
then and then
no.
what happened is you kick it down the road, and then then what would happen is the fight would be, and the phone calls would be going, and this fight's happening, that's happening, whatever. And then you get the fight, and it's like, well, fight's 10 weeks away. And I'm like, shit, I need 10 weeks. Because like I said, I need 4 or 5 weeks to get me to where I should be.
Yeah, that's right.
As a professional athlete, really where I was, what it took me I was getting 4 or 5 weeks. That's like your pre-season.
Yeah.
That gets you to where you should be. Do you know what I mean?
That's
And then I
right.
needed 2 weeks to spar in and peak up there. I couldn't
Mm,
start sparring in 10 weeks the way I'd been living. I needed 4 or 5 weeks of a detox, of a base fitness, of a losing weight. It was like a pre-camp to get me to the point
yeah.
where I should have been walking around at, ticking over at. And if you're walking around and ticking over and living the life of a professional athlete, and that doesn't mean you have to be a monk, but if you go to the gym 4 times a week,
Yeah.
not 10 sessions a week, run in the morning, just 4 times a week. If you hit the
Mm,
bag once a week, you do a bit of strength you hit the bag a couple of times a week, you do a bit of strength and conditioning a couple of times a week. You're there. You'll stay at a
yeah.
level. You only need to add the sparring 4 or 5 weeks. These
Mm,
mad camps now, and I get it because I used to do this as well. I was doing 4 rounders, and I remember when I turned over, I was doing some 4 rounders, and I remember running 9 miles in the morning 3 times a week as fast as I could because
wow.
I read someone else did it that was fighting for world titles.
Yeah.
Like that was completely that was insane. There was no need at all. But because it's the blind leading the blind leading the blind,
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
reading it fighters who are up there and you're aspiring to be like these guys. So you're
Of
copying
course.
them, but it's
Mm,
not where I needed to be. But it's like, you know, boxing and training, it's this camp mentality and how long a camp needs to be. It's like, well, it depends where you're at. Like you
yeah.
say, I needed weeks because I hadn't been living how I should have been living. But
Mm.
if you're living the life, you should be able to get in a few weeks.
Unless you're up to that big standard where you're a Canelo or a Terence Crawford or a Mayweather or something like that, you should be training. You should have a base fitness all year round and ready, especially on the way up. You know what I mean? And I think James Toney, I think that's the reason he used to fight so often because he was worried if he wasn't in camp, what he'd do. Obviously, and put on weight and I think Prince Nazim Hamed, I think when he sort of declined was when he started going into camp just to lose weight. He had to lose all that weight, so he wasn't really improving his skills or getting that fit. Because I think that's by the time he had all the money in that hurt him against Barrera because he had to come back and lose so much weight.
Big time. But so when you think about it, it all comes down to a little bit, or it certainly plays a part, is the money again. Because when there's big money,
Mm.
it's a big event to generate the money. So it's a lot of negotiating. A lot of things have to fall in line. The venue has to be available. The television slot has to marry with it. Can they, all this stuff. So it takes time. So you're only boxing twice a year, and then you're only boxing twice a year. So you've got a lot of downtime. And in the downtime, what are you going to do? Especially when boxing training is so intense, so
Oh yeah,
hard, so lonely.
very
You know,
lonely.
you're human. We're not machines, we're human beings. So then it's like you want to overindulge, you want to live for a bit, but of course, it's keeping that, to suddenly stop enjoying yourself. You're not really going to stop having a good time until you need to.
Yeah,
You know what I
true.
mean? So
Very
when you haven't
true.
got a date, you don't. So it's like it's almost like a vicious cycle.
100%.
You know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
hard to stop it.
So, how many? So on the way up, before you fought Jamie Moore, that was that probably your first biggest fight, was it, Jamie Moore?
Yeah, it was the big one. I'd lost a fight before that. I was 9-0 and I lost a fight in my first 10 rounder. I
Yep.
thought I won it. It was a close, scrappy fight. I
Yep.
guess it could have gone away. I mean, at the time, I thought I was hard done by, but
Was you the
in reality,
favourite going into that fight?
yeah, definitely. I was meant to win it. It was a step up, but looking back, he was awkward. I got a few things wrong as well. I put on far too much weight after the
Yeah.
weigh-in.
Yeah.
I was again reading what people put on this much weight, and
Yeah.
I felt really sluggish. Didn't box well. Still thought I'd done enough, but whatever. Then I rebuilt. I think I won about 7 or 8 on the bounce, and then the Jamie Moore fight happened. Um, yeah, I mean, it was a hell of a fight.
Yeah. Was
Uh,
that for the British title?
British title, super welterweight. Um, lost. Obviously, Jamie won the fight. Got
Yep.
knocked out in the 10th round. Stretchered out the ring, taken to hospital in an ambulance, kept overnight. Um, yeah, it was it was a brutal fight. Completely exhausted in the end. I was dehydrated. They kept me in overnight for rehydration
Yep.
and
Yep.
um and recovery, I guess. And then I didn't box for about 10 months after that. Again, just through bad luck. I mean, I wasn't going to box that year because of the fight, the way it was,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
I went to box in January, then I got ill. Then the fight in February fell through. Then the fight in March, I bruised my ribs a few weeks before sparring. I was meant to box in May, and then the television pulled the slot. You know what I mean? It just all
Yeah.
these things. Then box in June because I was training with Billy Graham, who trained with Hatton, and Hatton was fighting Castillo in Vegas. So
Yeah. I remember that.
I ended up boxing in July. You know what I mean? Having lost in the September the year before. So that was a tough period because
Hmm.
after a loss you're desperate to get back winning to just put it behind you and move forward. And of
Hmm.
course, not boxing for 10 months or whatever it was a difficult period for me mentally, confidence wise.
But you got back up, mate, because you how many fights between that fight did you get the title shot against Felix Sturm in Germany?
Uh, Probably 10, I
Yep.
would imagine. Yeah, I'm guessing probably more than 10. It was, what was it now? The Moore fight, the last against Jamie was September 2006, and I fought Sturm in June 2011. So, nearly 5 years on.
Yep. You had a good
Um,
run then, obviously. And then I mean, after the Moore fight, did you still believe that you would get back up to that level at the world title level?
yeah, I did. I did. I did. Yeah, I knew I had ability. You know what I mean? I was a top amateur. Uh, I was a top amateur, and I knew it wasn't like I was a top amateur. I had a pro style. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I thought I was going to be a good pro, and I was a good pro, but I got a few things wrong
Mm.
along the way. Um, the fight with Jamie. Jamie won the fight, but I think I lost it as much as he won it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I come out. I was 24 years old. I was far too fired up, way too fired up. You know what I mean? I come out in fifth gear. And the reality was Jamie had been there. He'd been in those fights. He'd been involved in a fight of the year a couple of times, I think, at that point, and up and down. He'd had his losses. He'd lost 3 times up at that point. He'd punched himself out before against Scott Dixon. So he'd learned the necessary lessons, which I hadn't. And that's what won him the fight. He
You
thought,
can't beat
he was
experience, mate. Can't beat
his
experience.
experience. He knew when to rest. He knew how to steal a rest. He knew when to step on me and make me go again. His experience won him the fight. But I was 24 years old, and um, you don't become a bad fighter overnight. You certainly don't become a bad fighter because of a loss.
Of course not.
Um, if anything, it probably made me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Oh,
Um, and so yeah, no, for in terms of confidence and belief. In terms of belief, I still believe they could get there. Confidence can waver. Confidence can waver. And self-doubt can obviously kick in. But then, we have this inner dialogue, don't we? And it's the devil and the
yeah.
angel.
Yeah.
So, and that's all going on.
So let's talk about the Stern fight. It was one of the biggest robberies I've seen in many years. Obviously, I don't want to really bring back bad memories, mate, but not just me, but many people believe you won that fight. Tell me about the whole process. You're in Germany, you've weighed in, you're fighting for the world title. Tell me what was going through your mind, and tell me about the fight, and then your opinion on the decision.
Um, by the decision, Germany it was a great experience. When the fight came about, I'd been professional, I think, 10 years at that point. It was a long time. I'd had injuries. Like I say, I'd changed promoters, I'd changed trainers numerous times. It hadn't been a smooth ride. I'd had my losses,
Yeah.
my comebacks, etc. I'd had tough periods. And when the Stern fight came about, I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to look beyond this because I was terrible for that. Oh, what's next? What's next? I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to be present in the training. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm not going to look beyond it. And I did enjoy it, and I put everything into it. And luckily, and this doesn't always happen, I didn't pick up any injuries. I wasn't ill. I was healthy all through the training. Um, Everything couldn't really have gone much better. And we went over to Germany. They were brilliant. They were very professional. Couldn't have treated us any better. Um, had good support. Probably 500 came
Yep.
over.
Yep.
They all kind of pretty much came at the weigh in, and they came to the weigh in, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean. And because
They're nice and loud. Yeah.
it was like it was, and it was at the Lanxess Arena, which is the biggest indoor arena in Europe. It was brilliant. Michael Buffer was the MC. It was brilliant. It couldn't
Yeah.
have been much better, to be honest. And I think I remember like being in the changing rooms. I remember being on the ring walk, and I remember feeling how you should feel. I
Yeah.
felt I felt invincible. I remember walking to the ring thinking, I don't care if King Kong was in the corner tonight. No one's beating me tonight.
Yeah.
That's where my head was, and that's how you should feel.
Yeah.
I haven't always felt like that for
No,
every
you don't.
fight
You can't. You can't always feel like
because
that.
when everything goes to plan,
Yeah.
you do feel like that. When things don't go to plan and there's niggles or there's injuries or there's things you've got to try and train around or stuff you couldn't do, and maybe things didn't go as well, but then these things have an impact, and they play a part. But everything went perfect. Everything couldn't have gone. I couldn't have wanted anything to have gone better, and it did. And so because of that, I felt, I felt, I felt brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, and then I thought the fight went how we wanted it to go. We said set a fast pace. Do you know what I mean? I remember thinking if he hits me once, I'm going to hit him twice. If he hits me 3 times, I'm going to hit him 5 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just thought I thought Sturm, he's big at the weight. He likes to pick his shots. He's a good fighter, but he won't be able to go at my pace. He won't be able to outwork me. And that was the game plan. And I remember thinking, as long as I'm up, going into the second half, he has to chase the fight, and Sturm isn't a good at chasing the fight. I didn't feel, I thought he hasn't got the power to knock me out. He's
Mm.
crisp, but he's not concussive puncher. Um, and I don't think he'll be. I thought as long as I'm ahead going into the second half, I'll win the fight. And I thought I was well ahead going into the second half. I thought I was well ahead after 10 rounds. I remember thinking coming out for the last round, all I've got to do is stand on my feet, stand on my feet. I don't know what round it was, but I'm guessing rounds 8 or 9, something like that. I remember thinking to myself, when's he going to do something?
Mm.
I felt like, is this it? Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? I felt
Yeah.
like I'm pissing this. Do you know what I mean? That's what I felt. And yeah, when the bell went, I just thought, and I thought I'd won it easy. I thought I'd strolled it really. When you're in the ring and it's taking a while for the scores to be read, you do
Yeah, that's a nervous one.
start getting nervous. And then when I heard split decision, I just thought they're gonna fuck me here.
Yeah. You knew when they said split?
I heard split decision, I thought that's it, they've done me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because in my mind, I couldn't see how anyone could have had been winning. Now look, I watched the fight back a few times, and it was probably closer than what I thought it was on the night. Because on the night, I just felt like I was so on top. But
Mm.
he definitely. Do you know what frustrates me about the fight, bar the decision, is that, and I'm glad. In one sense, I'm glad that people talk about the decision because I felt like I should have got it.
Mm.
But it I feel bad that people don't talk about what a good fight it was.
Yeah.
It was a brilliant fight of which he absolutely played his part. You know what I
Mm.
mean? He absolutely played a great fight too. We both did. It was my sort of work, right? He's probably more quality moments, but not, in my opinion, not enough of them. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
But he
Mm.
certainly played his part in what was a great fight. But nobody talks about what a great fight it was because everyone just talks about the bad decision.
What were the scores in the split?
I
Do you
think it
remember?
was. I think there was 2-1. I think there was 115, 113 him. Same for me. And I think one judge had it 116, 112 for him.
Yeah. IG 116, 112.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought 116, 112 was about. I know, I know Lennox Lewis and Dan Raphael, who did it for Epics in America, had it 117, 111 for me.
Wow.
Um, I thought 116, 112.
What was it feeling in your camp, and what did was your Frank still your promoter at the time?
No, at the
No.
time I was Frank had been my promoter, and then we hadn't agreed a new deal. And then I ended up agreeing a deal to sign with Golden Boy, and I was going my first fight on that 3-fight deal. Then was going to be the co-feature, the chief support fight to Khan McCluskey.
Yep.
But then this offer came into fight Sturm, and we hadn't signed the agreement because we'd agreed the terms with the
Yep.
promoter, but we just couldn't agree on clauses.
So he was a free agent, pretty much, sort of thing.
So I was a free agent
Yeah.
we did, but it did create a bit of a situation because Sky ended up pulling the plug from the pay-per-view, and the Carl McCluskey ended up being on prime time as opposed to
Oh.
Sky regular.
Oh.
They wanted to put it on pay-per-view, so yeah, it caused it caused a bit of a
And what
stir.
was your team's reaction to it? I mean, they were adamant that you won it and fairly clearly.
Yeah, completely. I think everyone did. And then when we got to the post-fight press conference, Brian Peters, who was my manager, didn't say anything. He just read out tweets of other people. Um, Andre Ward, Carl Froch, Lou DiBella, Sergio Martinez, Eddie Hearn, all the people from the boxing world who were unanimous in
Mm.
their outrage of the decision. So that made me feel a lot better. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It was a big, like I said, Sturm's a big star in Germany. Like he's
Yeah, I
a
know.
cross. So the press conference was mobbed, and German television had me winning by 4 or 5 rounds. I think 116, 112, they had it.
Wow.
88% of German viewers voting online that watched it had me winning. Um,
Wow.
Sturm never said a word at the press conference, not one word.
Mm.
He just wanted to get out of
Yeah.
there.
So you obviously my actually teammate in the amateurs and from my hometown in Tasmania, Daniel Gill went over and actually got the decision against Sturm, thank God. But was that long after you fought him or when Daniel went over there?
No, no, not long after. Not long after. I think it was I think was it the year after maybe?
Yeah,
I think it was back. Listen, maybe did Gale a favour because
yeah,
the outrage of my decision probably helped him get
yeah,
a fair shake.
yeah, true.
Daniel Gill boxed in well not my last amateur fight was it was in the Acropolis Cup
Yep,
and he was boxing for Australia in that
yep.
down at welterweight and I'd boxed up welterweight. I'd won the ABAs at welterweight but couldn't do it anymore. And I went to the Acropolis 71 kilos. I didn't box in the World Championship because I was injured in the training. I think I was in the training. Yeah, they didn't pick me because I was going to. I'd have been cutting it fine, and the Acropolis Cup was a couple of weeks later. And I think you guys on the way back to Australia stopped off in Athens and boxed in the Acropolis Cup. And I think Gale won the gold medal or won the silver or the gold the
Yeah,
weight below me,
yeah,
and I got beaten in the final by the Russian
yeah,
who beat me. I think 12-9 or 12-10.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so it's funny how paths cross or align. And even though me and Gil never fought, we were meant to box in July of 2014,
Okay,
and he pulled out. HBO pulled the plug on the July show. We were meant to fight, and he
okay.
ended up fighting Golovkin instead.
Oh, okay, that was later. Yeah, yeah, because yeah, well, mate, we were amateurs together. I was his team captain. Because I'm older than Daniel by about 3 or 4 years. But yeah, he went over there first to Germany. He beat Sebastian Sylvester for the IBF title, and backed it up and went back to Germany and beat Sturm for the WBA. So he actually got two decisions in Germany. But that might have helped him your fight because with all the backlash, because that's what our biggest worry in Australia was he going to get the decision? Because not just your fight, but didn't he have another couple of doubtful? He fought another Englishman, didn't he? And got and he there was a bit of controversy as well.
Was
Was
it the
that?
Gale? Did Gale not beat? I thought Gale beat for the IBF. So actually, that must have been 214 because didn't he box?
Gil beat Sebastian Sylvester for the IBF, and there was unification against Stern for the WBA. I'm pretty sure.
That's right. And then Darren Barker beat Gale for the IBF. Yeah, two.
Martin Murray had a split draw with Stern
That was after me. Yeah.
after you. How did that one play out? Was he robbed as well or not? That was straight
Uh,
after you, actually. I'm just looking on
yeah.
BoxRec. Straight after
I don't,
you.
I can't remember. I don't think I watched the fight.
Mm.
I just heard the result.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then Daniel Gill lost to Darren Barker.
Yeah.
Yeah, which that was yeah. And so after that, mate, then you fight the great at the time. I think he was pound for pound number two, and an absolute, he'd been talked about as one of the best around for a long time, Sergio Martinez.
Mm.
How did that fight come about after Sturm?
Well, after Sturm, like I said, I was a free agent. So Lou DiBella flew us out to New York. We met with him. We met with HBO, and then I signed with Lou. Moved out to New York in the September, um, and I was meant to box in the November, and I don't know, there was an issue with the scheduling that dates, but they didn't. I think they didn't end up going with one. They pulled the plug on a show. So then it was like I was in limbo a little bit, but then the Martinez fight came about because he was looking to fight Chavez Jr. or Mayweather,
Mm.
but then the opportunity came for him to fight on St. Patrick's Day at Madison Square Garden. So
Wow.
I think even though I lost the fight to Stern because pretty much everybody had been winning it,
Yeah.
certainly, like I said, American television had it 117, 111. So HBO took that fight, me and Martinez, and yeah, I mean, like I said about the Stern fight, walk into the ring, you feel how you should feel. Everything went well. Martinez, that I couldn't. That wasn't exactly well. It wasn't the same. I went out there 11 weeks before, was training, started sparring about 6 weeks out. And sparring's first couple of weeks, not the sharp, wasn't sharp, didn't feel great, but it was getting there. And then my manager, Brian Peters, come out with a guy who sponsors me, a guy called Mike Dunley, and a few guys that I would have played hurling with when I was younger, like as like a
Yeah.
bit of a promotional press thing. And I remember we on the Tuesday we sparred. I sparred 9 rounds. I think I did 4 or 5 rounds with uh Sekou Powell and 4 or 5 rounds with Austin Trout,
Yep.
who was good sparring
Yeah,
for
good
us for
fighter.
my team.
Yeah.
And he was good, yeah. And I sparred well that day. And it was the best I'd sparred. I mean, it wasn't where I wanted to be come fight on, but I was getting there. It was pretty good. And I remember the next day. I didn't feel it at the time because the adrenaline. That night I felt a bit sore in my rib. The next day when I woke up, I really hurt me getting out of bed, and I thought, shit, I've done something here. So I thought I'll see how it goes. So when I got it X-rayed, and they said it's not broken, but you bruised your ribs. So
Oh God.
I'm 3 weeks out now. Do you know what I mean? So just under. So I still got probably 5 sparring sessions to go, 5 or 6 sparring sessions to go. So I didn't do it. So we said, well, I'll have to lay after sparring. So on the Saturday, we did 12 round. Buddy, we got put on this body pad, and we did 12 rounds on this body pad to try and replicate 12 intensive rounds.
Mm.
Um, but I was smashing the body pad with the body shots with the left hook, and I had 10-ounce gloves on, which were probably in hindsight, I don't know if it's so much the gloves, but the wraps, because Buddy sometimes used to wrap my hands, and when I was sparring, that was great because you have 16-ounce gloves on, and
Yeah,
you don't land that many shots, do you? You land as many, not as many as you land on the bag, put it that way.
that's
But,
right.
you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
like, but with the fight gauze, instead of using track, what I'm trying to say is, in sparring, having fight gauze on was fine because you're 16-ounce gloves and you're not landing as
Mm.
many shots. But with the 10-ounce gloves on and the fight gauze, it didn't give me the necessary protection. And when I
Yeah.
took the gloves, and I didn't realize this was happening, but when I took the gloves off, my knuckles on the left hand were like completely skinned to the bone.
Oh, damn.
And like, they were deep. And from that point on to the fight, I couldn't punch. I mean, even I remember on the night of the fight, I couldn't even hit the pad. I hit the pad to warm up, and I had to stop because it was hurting. Now, that didn't hurt me in the fight. It didn't play a part in the fight, but it played a part in my preparation to the
Of
fight.
course. Yeah, mentally too.
Missing out on 6 sessions, missing out on probably 10 pad sessions. You know, that's probably 10% of your preparation, more maybe, because it's not just the physical sparring, is in the sharpness and the distance and the timing. It's not just the pads, it's the confidence and the belief,
Yeah, of course.
all of that as well. It's the sharpness.
Mm.
And when I think about the fight with Martinez, how nip and tuck it was after 10 rounds, I do think if that hadn't happened, I think it'd have got me over the line. After 10 rounds in that fight, coming out for that 11th round, I was 3 up on one of the cards. I was a round down on the other two. Do you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah.
So they put me down twice at the end of the 11th, and then Buddy didn't let me out for the 12th. But I do believe if that hadn't have if the rib and the knuckles hadn't happened, I think I'd have beat Sergio Martinez that night.
Mate, you've that would yeah, geez. Well, you fought the two of the top guys in a row, and at the time, I think he was the Ring Magazine champion,
Was yeah,
Martinez. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's, I mean, that's the
By the way, I don't. It's on the night. Like maybe we would have. Maybe we had a rematch or 3 fights. Maybe I wouldn't have beat Martinez the next one. But on that night,
Mm.
I, I think I would have beaten him because I think what happened with Sergio as well. He'd have watched the Stern fight, and that's what he was expecting.
Yeah.
I threw nearly 1,000 punches in the Stern fight. I threw a lot of combinations. I was very aggressive. It was a hell of a pace, and he expected that. But obviously, I boxed Martinez completely different. I
Mm.
stayed back on the back foot. I was using lots of feints. I trained with, it threw him. He couldn't find the rhythm because Martinez was a counter puncher,
He was. Yeah.
but I was countering the counter puncher, and
Yeah.
it fucked him really. You know what I mean? He couldn't get his head around it because Buddy's wife's Puerto Rican, and so she speaks Spanish, and she said um, that what he called me after, and he said we talked about the fight, etc. And he said like whatever round it was, round 8 or 9 or something. He said his trainer was saying to him, you know, Sergio, come on, what's wrong with you, man? Come on, we need to go. And he looked despondent and said, I can't work him out
Mm.
because. And I remember Buddy saying to me when we met, but he said, all you got to do in this fight is use the jab. It's that simple. That's how you win the fight. Feints and jab,
Yep.
and don't become predictable.
Just keep it
Just
simple.
keep it really simple. Plenty of feints, lots of head movement, and just keep giving him a different look. And don't, but keep just boxing. And Buddy knew I could box. I trained with Buddy before, back in 2008. Uruguay campus, and he knew, and I did another training camp out there where the fight didn't happen because the main event got pulled, but he knew me and he knew I could box as well as fight, so he knew Martinez. He was looking. Martinez was thinking he's going to get this Macklin that's going to come forward throwing loads of punches, and he'll just pick me off or counter punch me. Do you know what I mean? But when I stood back and boxed him, it offset him. It threw him, but.
Yeah.
But with not having those extra 5 or 6 sparring sessions, not having those extra sort of
Mm.
probably 8, 9, whatever pad sessions, that's a big part of your preparation. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Massive
it's
part.
the
Massive part.
massive part, and it's the part of the preparation where you get that confidence and that belief. And I didn't get it. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Well, and not long after that, I think you had like a win or two. Then you get another massive name, Triple G, one of the greatest middleweights of the modern era. Well, he's up there. Yeah, I think he might have had as many defenses as Hopkins and even Hagler. But the great Gennady Golovkin, mate, tell me how that fight eventuated and where was you at going to that fight against Gennady?
sort of similar situation with the Martinez fight where I did the knuckles again. I went over to New York 5 weeks out. I was fit. I'd already done a couple of weeks sparring in Spain, so I was 5 weeks was plenty for where I was at. And the first day we did the pads, and same thing, split all the knuckles. And again, it was only after this with the when I did it for Martinez, I thought it was the body pad
Mm.
that was the reason why it happened. But it was only after it happened training for Golovkin that I realized now it was the gauze. It was the fight. It was hitting pads with fight gauze on
Yeah,
as opposed to training wraps.
yeah, yeah.
Because fight gauze, it's thin, isn't it? It's
Of
thin.
course, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
definitely.
you know what I mean? Where training wraps is a lot
Yeah,
more solid,
yeah.
more pad on the hand. Where
They should just be
so
used for sparring, not the pads. Just have
yeah,
the normal wraps. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Or just not at all in training,
Mm.
just for
Mm.
fights.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can
pretty
use the
much.
spot,
Yeah.
but really, like you just.
Mm.
So then it's like, right, what do we do here? And I wanted to pull out of the fight. I wanted to put it back. I didn't want to pull out of the fight. I wanted to fight Golovkin, but I didn't want to fight him on that day 'cause I
Yeah.
knew I wasn't ready. And my manager was on a conference call with HBO, Lou, a few other people, and they said after the call, he called me up and he said, he relayed the conversation to me, and then I said to him, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "We'll put it this way." He said, "I think from a career point of view, you're better off going ahead with the fight and losing than not going ahead with the fight." He said, because officially they said to me, if he's not fit to fight, he's not fit to fight. But unofficially they said to me, if he doesn't box Golovkin on June 29th, he'll never box on HBO again.
Yeah. Wow.
So what are you going to? I
What are you
was
going to do?
31, 31. You know, I'd been pro 12 years at this point. It was my it was my career best payday by quite a bit, and it was a case of like, what are you going to do? If I'm signed with Lou DiBella, who's got to deal with HBO, and they're telling me if I don't box Golovkin on this date, I'll never be on HBO again. Where do I go?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so I trained round it best I could, and got to the fight. And but again, talking like walking to the ring, confidence wise, belief wise, wasn't where it should have been.
mm.
How could it be? I mean, reality, where Golovkin had 3 fights that year, I'd had one round in 15 months. I'd had
Yeah,
one round this fight, which was a first round knockout over Alcine, which was a great win.
mm.
But in terms of activity, I'd had one round in 15 months. Golovkin had boxed 3 times that year.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I knew he was the real deal. Golovkin was the same age as me. He won the gold medal at the World Junior Championships that I boxed in, the weight below me, and he
yeah.
got best box tournament.
He's a
So
freak.
I knew he was good. I knew how good he was. But at that point, like the Jamie Moore fight, in the sense where he hadn't been through that situation yet, I had at this
Yeah,
point. So I've just got to try and take him to that place. You know what I mean? And when I agreed the fight, I believed I could do it. By the time the fight come along, I hoped I could do it,
yeah,
but I probably didn't really believe I could
yeah, yeah.
because of training.
Yeah, well, mate, yeah, but there's no disrespect in losing to a great future Hall of Fame like Gennady Golovkin.
Oh, and the loss wasn't the part that bothered me. It was the fact that I didn't get to do myself justice with the performance. The fact that I didn't get to, um, I didn't get a chance to give my best. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Because because of the preparation. You know, don't get me wrong. If I'd have prepared as well as I could have, and you went out and got caught done in the third round, then it is what it is. But I don't know. I remember after the fight, not that night, but the days and the weeks that pass after when you reflect on everything. I remember feeling really bad about it all. You know what I mean? It was definitely the loss that hurt me the most, and it was the best fighter I'd lost to. So in that sense, it shouldn't have. But it was the whole thing about being, being sort of given that ultimatum about knowing I was injured and
Yeah,
not going
of
to
course. You're backed
I'll
into
take
a corner. You didn't really have, yeah, they
it.
didn't give you any opportunities there.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Well, mate, you went out fighting two of the best of your era, Martinez and Triple G, and we all know you got robbed of what should have been, your world title dream of against Sturm. But I mean, you definitely had a great career, mate. I was obviously, I watched a lot of your fights, mate, and it was really rapt to meet you when I first met you in Saudi, mate, because as I said, you've been one of the really good fighters in the UK in the recent years.
I appreciate you saying that. We had a good conversation. And I remember your buddy Gail. Well, like I say, I remember him from the amateurs. It was the Acropolis Cup in Athens. That's where we
Yeah,
met.
yeah,
Um, and then our paths did very nearly cross in the pros. Like I said, we were. I was training to fight him in July. I think it was in Corpus Christi. We were meant to box. Um, were we the main event? I don't even think we were the main event, or we were the chief support fight. It was a double header, HBO, but HBO
yeah.
pulled the plug. Um, Golovkin, Golovkin, they did the Gil fuck because I think no, I think he was penciled, scheduled to fight Chavez Jr.
Okay.
Golovkin was, and me and Gil were fighting, and then when uh when Chavez pulled out,
Yeah.
they
Scrap
switched
the
it.
card, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
He's actually a really nice guy too, Gilly. He's one of the gentlemen of the sport. Pretty quiet, but he
yeah.
could box. He was a great boxer, definitely. So tell
Yeah.
me, mate, before we finish up, mate, tell me, did you ever think in a million years that Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren would be working together? Like, how much effect has Your Excellency had on that because I never would have dreamed to see them two together.
Yeah, big time. Money talks,
It
doesn't it?
does.
Money talks, and and look, that's where it's at the minute. You know, the big fights are happening in Saudi Arabia. That's where the money is. That's where the fights are happening, and obviously, His Excellency is capable and able to bring these guys together and get them down and get them to do deals. And it, you know, isn't it a lot better, you know, when people are
Oh, of
making
course.
deals rather
Mm,
than fighting and swiping each other and you know, look, everyone's got their own agenda and everyone wants to do best for them and their business, and that's totally fine. But but for the it's better for the bigger, wider boxing public if people are just getting on. And actually, it's better for them
mm,
if they can get on and do business.
definitely. Well, what do you think about? What's your opinion on the up and coming Ben and Eubank fight?
I think it's a massive fight here in the UK in terms of it's a crossover fight to the casual fan that probably watches 3 or 4 fights a year because of the name recognition
Yeah,
and the profile of both guys, which we got to be honest, the surname has played a big part in getting them to where they are.
of course.
Obviously, they've got to go in and train and do the fights and win fights. Of course, they have. So they deserve a lot of credit themselves as well. But it wouldn't be it wouldn't be complete if we didn't mention the father effect. You know,
Of course.
their rivalry. Um, in terms of like where do you rank it with other big fights in the UK between two Brits? It's because I got asked this question on Sky. They said, is it the biggest or could it one the big? I said, well, not really, because there's been world title fights in
Yeah,
Britain between two Brits. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah,
this isn't a world title fight, but in terms of an event, in
yeah.
terms of like publicity and attention, and all, oh yeah, right up there, right up there. But in terms of significance as a fight in the wider boxing landscape, no, there's been lots of bigger
Of course.
fights.
Oh, well, look at the with their fathers. Eubank, Ben Watson, Lewis Bruno. I mean, like there's been I mean heaps.
Quite right, AJ.
Yeah.
Quite
DeBar
right, AJ.
AJ, huge. Yeah. So thanks for bringing it up, AJ. Where do you see him at, mate? Like, is he finished at the top level? Should he rematch Dubois? Will the fight with him and Fury happen? Will money talk and Fury come out after he's had a good rest because he did have two big camps back to back against Usyk? What's your opinion there on AJ's future?
So boxing is hard. Boxing's hard in the ring. Boxing training is hard. Boxing life is lonely and hard. And I can't imagine at 34 years of age, if I'd suffered a knockout defeat like he had to Dubois, I just can't imagine what would that money, when I've already got loads of money, would be enough of a motivator to get me to go through all that again. You know, he went into that last fight looking good in his previous performances. He had a new trainer, Ben Davison. He had 2 good wins with him. You know what I mean? He looked sharp and he looked confident and he was the favourite going into the fight. Like I don't know, like he suffered a pretty I would imagine that was pretty traumatic for him being knocked out in front of 100,000 people and you know, look, the Fury fight, I guess he might think, well, Fury's at the back end too, but AJ looked a lot more shot recently than what Fury has,
Mm.
and I can't imagine. Look, I don't have their kind of money, so I can't really say. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm guessing if I had that kind of money, that money wouldn't motivate me.
yeah.
Listen, money didn't really motivate me anyway, to be honest. Yeah, it was definitely a part of the decision making process in terms of direction and fights, etc. And at the end, it was more of a decision. It was more of a factor in the decision making process. But certainly, once the fight was agreed and everything, training hard in the gym, getting up in the morning, doing whatever, the money wasn't the thing that drove me.
wasn't.
And I'm sure it's not the driving factor for those guys, but when it comes down to the fight with Fury being negotiated, agreed or not agreed, I guess money is going to come up and it's going to be a lot of money, but he's got to, I would imagine everything in boxing is risk reward, isn't it? Risk reward
Of
ratio.
course, of course.
So like, you know, health factor, in football, if you generally people you don't get the decision to retire because you get dropped from the team. You know what I mean? And then you either choose to be a sub or you choose to go down a level. Do you know what I mean? Now in boxing, no one's dropping you. You're your own boss, and certainly where they can say, "No, I want to keep going." But I guess from AJ's point of view, he's got to think, well, if I beat Fury, I'm back up there and I've got a level of redemption and I've
Mm,
earned X amount of money, more millions. Or I'm not going to win and I might get outpointed, and that's okay because I get outpointed, we lose in a good fight and we earn loads of money and I'll go out on that note. Or I go in and I could get absolutely knocked spark out
mm.
by Fury, and then I've got extra amount of millions in the bank, of which I'm probably not ever going to need spending anyway. But I've got to live with the fact that I got knocked out by Dubois, and then I got knocked out by Fury.
Yeah,
So from
true.
you, what does that do for me? And secondly, what does that do from a health point of view? I don't
Mm.
know. It's these are all things you've got to throw up and weigh up, isn't
Yeah,
it?
of course. I think it'll happen personally. I think that it's such a big fight, probably the biggest in history in Britain, like Wembley Stadium. I think, or I think that Fury will have a rest after and then there'll be a bit of back and forth in the media. And I think it'll happen. I think AJ will probably fight before then, and I think it'll be too big for him not to take it. That's just my opinion. I
I,
think.
I agree with you. I think that the most likely outcome is it happens,
Mm.
but then it makes you. But I've thought to myself, I'm just trying to put myself as if like, well, what if he was my brother?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
what would I want him to do?
of course.
I'd want him to retire,
Yeah,
you know. But the reality is, who's around him that really, everyone around him has got a commercial interest,
yeah, definitely.
and they're going to want it to go ahead,
Yeah.
and they will also convince themselves because there is the upside,
Mm,
there is the possibility that he wins.
mm,
He's definitely, and if he
yeah.
wins, then what a win, and you're back up, and it'll put the Dubois loss to bed, and blah blah blah.
Mm,
Like that's not impossible.
mm.
Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? That's what it's like. You've got to think what's possible, but what's probable,
Yeah.
and it's way up, isn't it?
Was you surprised with the Hamza Shiraz fight? Did you sort of expect more from him at that level? I know I predicted him to win that fight. I know it was a draw, and a few people had the opinion. Would you expect more from him?
Yeah, I did. I did expect more. I believe he injured his hand early doors in the fight.
Yeah,
I'm sure that was a factor. But like I say, he got the draw. I didn't think it was a draw myself personally. But he'll probably get another crack at it, and if he can remain injury free, I'm sure that the experience of that fight
yeah.
will hold him in good stead.
Yeah. So two more questions before we go. So when I was at the WC convention in Hamburg late last year, was a few English. Me Khan was there, and there's a few other English boxers there. And we were having a bit of a chat, and I asked this question. I want to ask you, who's been the biggest, probably the biggest star in UK boxing in their career? Who had the biggest, crowd? Who had the biggest support base? Would you say would it be Hutton? Would it be Naz? Would it be Bruno? Who in your opinion?
Um, I think in terms of fan base, just pure like loyal fan base, I would say Hatton.
Yeah,
Although
yeah,
in my time, because Bruno was a bit young for Bruno, but then Bruno was really loved as
yeah.
well, and Bruno was more mainstream because he boxed
Mainstream. Yeah.
terrestrial television. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It was a
mm,
different time, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, he was on television show. Hatton. in terms of the modern era where it's Sky Television, cable TV,
Mm,
off terrestrial television. I mean, what a star he became, and what a
huge.
fan base he
Yeah,
had. Uh, but I think in terms of, I think in terms of maybe not the fan base in terms of of either of those guys, but I think in superstardom, I think Nassim Hamed
yeah,
was probably, you know what I mean?
yeah,
He was showbiz, you know
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good question though, isn't it? Because you've had so many great stars. You've had the Bens and the Eubanks, and you've had the Lennox Lewises, and you've had so many great fighters over the years. But I mean, yeah, I just wanted to know who was that mainstream star, and yeah, they're the couple that know. I mean, I had the honour of looking after Ricky Hatton. He come to Melbourne, Australia, one weekend. I think he had a Russian guy. He was doing a deal for a Russian boxer. He looked after Rabashenko, the fight Anthony Mundine. And I think he was running a bit of a muck, and they said, "Look, Tassie, it's my nickname. Can you take him out? Take the hitman out?" I said, "Yeah, my pleasure." So I took him out till about 4 a.m. in the morning. I lost him, and yeah, but he was a handful, mate. The hitman,
You lost him or he lost you?
one of the two, one of the two. We lost each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they couldn't keep up with him. They had him in Melbourne all week, and they said, "Look, a few of the night spots. Can you take him out?" And I took him out, and it was an honour because I used to train with Costa Zoo. He was one of my idols and one of my teammates. He's a lot older than me, but I looked up to Costa so much, and I was mentioning to Ricky about him beating my hero, but he said they got a good friendship and he was a bit of banter and that. Yeah, and but yeah, it was good to it was good to hang out with him, because he was one of the modern era greats, Ricky.
Yeah, as Costa Sue was as well, and yeah,
Yeah,
Ricky. I mean, Ricky. That I remember. I think that was the best night of Ricky's career. The
yeah,
Costa.
definitely. Yeah, yeah.
I think everything, the stars
Nobody,
aligned.
but nobody beats Hutton that night, mate. Roberto Duran, like that night. You talk about, yourself as a fighter. Everyone's got that one night where that's your night, and I think Mike Tyson, when he knocked out Michael Spinks, I think nobody beats him that night, and certain times. But I think that night with Ricky, he wasn't beating him with a cricket bat or a baseball bat that night.
No, it was his night. It was his time, and the stars aligned for him on that night.
Yeah. Last question before I let you go, mate. I really appreciate your time. Like I said, I've been trying to get you on for a while now, harassing you, but you finally give in to me. Mate, who's your who's non UK, non British, but who's your favourite fighter at the moment? On the scene, America or any country. Who's someone at the moment that you think that you really, as a boxing fan, like to watch?
Um, I don't know what is there. It's a tough one. I mean, there's a few, but
Yeah, you can name a few. Name a couple.
I like Terence Crawford.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like Shakur Stevenson.
yeah,
I know sometimes he's not the most exciting, um, and that's a shame because he's so good. But I think sometimes he can just coast. He'll
yeah,
just play coast. I
yeah.
know he has trouble with his hands as well, but he is top of the top, I
Yeah,
believe.
I've been saying it for a long time. Yeah,
He like top of the top. I, I can't see anyone beating him. There's
yeah.
nobody around where he is that I can see beating him. And I think he's going to be avoided by some of the
Oh, for
guys.
sure.
I think some of the guys in and around his weight that are big names,
Mm.
they're they're going to go nowhere near him.
Yeah.
Uh,
Do you
uh,
like in a way the Japanese boxer, the
love in a
monster?
way,
Yeah,
love in a way, love him. I listen. He you look Terence Crawford in a way, Shakur, Canelo. You know what I mean? Pound for
yeah,
pound, who's
yeah,
sick?
yeah, yeah,
You're tossing a coin, aren't you?
yeah. You are. Yeah, yeah. No, that's exactly the same as me, mate. You just named them five, pretty much. In my opinion, you got to put pretty much Bivol there as well. But yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
think
I'll say,
Terence the monster, Canelo and Shakur and all them guy Crawford. Yeah, definitely, mate, 100%. But well, mate, I just want to say again, thank you for being on Ringside Seat with Tassie, mate. It's been an honour. You're not only a great champion, a great commentator, but one of the good guys in boxing. And I've got a mutual friend, Mike Altamura, who's one of my dear friends. He's a great man as well, one of the best managers in boxing. And I just want to say, mate, it's a pleasure to have you. I really appreciate you being on.
No, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it, and I'll see you in Saudi next time, I'm sure.
You will, mate. Definitely, mate. Great to see you again, mate. All the best.
Awesome.
See you, champ. Bye, mate. Bye.